Ave Sam citizens. By now I'm sure many of you have heard the grave news of the expulsion of our state from the Grand Unified Micronational. It is grave to us because we have been so involved in this organization. We were present at its reestablishment, and we've been a large member in it since 2009. It's very upsetting to our government that we have been expelled in such a backhanded way. For some months now, since at least October, our state has been protesting the fact of the recent and increasing involvement and power and influence of the Kingdom of Wyvern in this organization. The reason why we protest this fact is because one can even listen to the arguments, slurs, and insults and offenses that Wyvernians have made over the course of their recent readmittance. One simply needs to listen to the common Islamophobic slurs, the common racist slurs against Arabs, and the common race science slurs, which scream back to the 1930s. It's amazing, and it's fascinating to me, why a chairman of the GUM would say that this state has been expelled for racist comments, giving no evidence to our state, but rather to a different country, and yet say that we're the ones making racist slurs. And these are the politicians who continuously go out and preach the criminality of Arabs in the Netherlands, that preach the supremacy and law of women. And it is a common proverb in our state, a common ideal, that a people cannot be equal under the law. They also have to be equal in society. It is the two-part system of equality. Equality under the law is meaningless. We discovered this with the 14th, 13th, and 15th Amendments in the United States. We've discovered this by common practice, by common sociology. There are things called coercion and conformity. And of course, in a sociological point of view, our state has now been ostracized because we have not conformed to their coercions. We have not conformed to their common tactics of belittling. We have stood up for our values. We have stood up because in the state of Sandus, in our society, and in our law, all people are equal regardless of race, religion, sex, gender, but vehicle. We are all equal. But some do not see it that way, and we call those people Wyvernians. Unfortunately, the chair of the Grand Unified Micronational has put so much power behind this. He's put so much emphasis, even prompting the Secretary of the Security Council to make reports on our state's racist comments. And yet, being interviewed by the A1 News Service, the chairman of the Grand Unified Micronational could not, in fact, give any evidence for this official reason. His words exactly. Could not give a single piece of evidence for which our state should be expelled from. No, in fact, he says that he had tremendous sadness at the fact that the motion had come. But listening to the voice and to the sincerity of the secretary, he finally opened up and decided that sandom expulsion had to be done. Oh, but Mr. Chairman, it took you only 16 seconds after that motion, that rather simply worded motion, was made until you said, "Oh, I support." That does not show any sadness. It does not even show any deliverance. It shows prior knowledge, which is something which screams and gives justice to what Nemkavia has recently done in protest. And of course, we are going to disagree. Some people stand up for their values, Mr. Chairman. They do. Which is why we opted instead for observership. In fact, in the past week we have decided that this issue should simply be swept under the rug. We decided that we should focus on more productive things. Unfortunately, the GUM chair and the GUM leadership seems that it's more important to focus on less productive things. If you'll recall, Mr. Chairman, we have not released any media in concerns to this rather 3 or 4 month long argument on the importance of racial, gender, and religious equality. We've released nothing. And yet, the day before New Year's Eve, the chair and the secretary of the Security Council believes it most imperative to expel Sandus and Neoclandia. That's what I find fascinating. When there is a lull in activity, you find it most important to expel a member state. Especially 2 member states which have a long history in your organization. And, well, besides Neoclandia, Sandus supported you in the election. I find that very moot as well, that you would consider a reason for expulsion to be offending the leadership. That's fascinating, because I truly wonder if that would have been a good explanation for an expulsion of Wyvern in April of this year, with only a day left. I find it fascinating. And yet, even with all the issues surrounding Wyvern in April of this year, and in May, and in June, not only with Wyvern, but with Nemkavia and with all the other member states, Sandus never stooped so low as to opt for expulsion or suspension of any of those member states. Not even with Wyvern. No. No, in fact, Wyvern decided of its own accord to leave. That's fascinating to me. Because yet I'm the offending one. I and my state are the offending ones. That is fascinating. But your turn, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate your reply, particularly because I have nothing left to do but focus on my state, which is something that apparently does not behoove you. So I truly await your response, Mr. Chairman. And frankly, if you really believe that few people actually will follow their beliefs, well, we'll just have to find out. Because by now, I am most certain that people will realize that this is a major injustice, not only to Sanders and Yoklandia, but to the GUM. In fact, I find it most amusing because the Federal Republic of Zealandia has been posting these statuses on Facebook talking about how it supports the Secretary, how it supports anti-imperialism. And yet, if we are to talk about imperialism today, Sanders is most certainly going against the imperialism of yesterday. It's moving against the imperialism of the colonial age. It's moving against the imperialism of the 1930s, when race science was big. And it's moving against the imperialism of the modern world. It's fascinating, because there is so much hypocrisy that it was even pointed out by the Supreme Judge himself. In your quorum, Mr. Chairman, the Supreme Judge herself, the Supreme Judge herself even pointed out that it would be hypocritical to only suspend Sanders. And that is the only reason why the Kingdom of Yoklandia was expelled with us, and not with us. It was the motion afterwards, after which the Secretary had said, "May we move on now, Mr. Chairman?" And the Supreme Judge said, "I object. You have to be fair." And you know what? Knowing the Supreme Judge, God bless him, because I know quite well that he was doing what he thought best for the GUM, and it's unfortunate that the Chairman and the Secretary couldn't do the same. So your turn, Mr. Chairman. Your turn. I've made my views clear over these 3 to 4 months. Your arguments saying that we haven't made them clear are really pointless, because we have. We have our evidence. We constantly point out these facts. We constantly, even in arguments that will occur in the same day, one will constantly say, "Oh, but you haven't backed those up." Yes, Mr. Chairman. Yes. The Livonian senior politicians are xenophobic, especially if they call a Romanian micronationalist a gypsy. And he's not. Yes, that is xenophobic, Mr. Chairman. It is also Islamophobic when they say that Islam is an awful religion, that Catholicism and Orthodoxy are awful religions. And I find it fascinating that few people, even though they will say, "We agree with you, Sôgmô, we agree that these views are wrong," they will not stand up for their views. And in some sort of way, Mr. Chairman, you have coerced and you have conformed them into acting in your manner, into acting sociologically for your political science of supporting women. And that's upsetting to me. And I'm sure it's upsetting to many people, not only in your organization now, not our organization anymore. You've made it so. Your organization, Mr. Chair. But also to many people in our community, in the intermicronational world, and especially, which is of most concern to me, in the state of Sanders. I await your response, Mr. Chairman. I know that at times in this address I've been perhaps a little too sarcastic. I truly can't myself from the amount of hypocrisy, the amount of bias, oh my, the amount of bias that has been your political move, not only in expelling Sandus and Lapplandia, but in your interview as well. It's been most fascinating, and I actually await the statement that I'm expecting from the Security Council. It's somewhat fascinating to me that the Security Council is now making policy in lieu of quorum. And this fact was pointed out by the Supreme Judge, who said that the Supreme Council has overstepped its boundaries. So not only, Mr. Chairman, do you have a political science issue and a sociological issue, you also have a legal issue. And I'm sure that you'll simply ignore them. You'll opt for the status quo of supporting Lunar. You won't do what's right, and I'm sure that many others won't do what's right either, because you've made them conform to the belief that if you just support Lunar, everything will be okay, won't be as bad. But now you've expelled Sandus and Yaroslav, and I truly wait for what's next, because never in my history as a micronationalist, very few times have I really ever had the chance to see a micronation, a state, be expelled over something that is actually completely based. It's not baseless and unfounded, as you say. It's based in fact and reason and logic. And it's been that way since the very beginning, in October or September of this year. So perhaps in this new year, Mr. Chairman, you can choose your new political path. And perhaps you can actually start doing what you believe in, and following the progressive spirit that is the GUM. Of course, I doubt you and many others will. And, quite sincerely, I don't have the time for it anymore. But alas, that is my life as Sôgmô. As I have said countless times before, I await your response, because I know you have it. It seems you always do. And your supporters will defend you. The Livernians will argue. They might even release a statement, to which there will be no reply. And some other micronation, some other state, will be expelled, perhaps in the future, for supporting our views of social progressiveness, social progress, and social equality. And perhaps, Mr. Chairman, one of those states would be your supporters. That would be most amusing. Very amusing, in fact. So in this new year, Mr. Chairman, this has really become an address to you and your leadership, and I do say your leadership, rather than an address to my people. But, Mr. Chairman, perhaps in this new year, since it is the New Year's Eve now, 2:30 in the morning, perhaps in this new year, Mr. Chairman, you can finally stand up for the social progressive spirit that is the GUM. Thank you. I expect you